think this topic is somewhat lost some muster over the last 18 months, perhaps, relative to Gen AI. But we'll talk about that because there's a convergence happening, not just Metaverse on its own, but also I think Web3 within Metaverse, as well as generative AI. You've got to have the discussion and looking at these technologies as a confluence and not just separate, disparate opportunities. So with that, I'd like to maybe offer brief introductions for each panelist and we'll dig in. So Krista, you can go first.
Hi, my name is Krista Kim. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a contemporary artist. I create Metaverse projects, and I also do public art installations globally. My next collaboration is with Mercedes. That's launching in July. Please look out for it. It's the Billboard campaign. I also started a startup called Zero Studio. We're a creative studio that really focuses on creating culture in the metaverse and in immersive experiences. And our three pillars are education, health and wellness, and culture at the intersection of art.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cathy Hackl. I am the Chief Futurist and Chief Metaverse Officer at innovation and design consultancy Journey. I've been working in technology for quite a long time with companies like spatial computing company Magic Leap, which spatial computing now is a hot term apparently after Apple mentioned it. Also worked with HTC Vive, a Taiwanese company known for VR hardware, and also did large-scale gaming simulations with Amazon Web Services. So I've been part of the emerging tech, XR, everything ecosystem for a while. I'm also an author. I'm also a luxury fashion tech founder and kind of just involved in a lot of the different spaces when it comes to emerging tech. So just thrilled to be here. And some of you guys saw me. I was the person wearing the funny looking device yesterday doing things with my, with my brainwaves. So.
Hi, I'll start again. Hi, everybody. My name's Ted. I work for Paramount, what's now called Paramount Global, which is this conglomerate of all these different entertainment entities, all of this one big exciting melange of stuff. Cathy and I are good friends. We connect on the technology and humanity fronts. I would say by way of introduction, I'm kind of a train wreck of an individual that is just constantly exploring and thinking about new things in new ways. And I thought it was super interesting when Trevor was mentioning about the startup guys that had to put on their jackets and their ties. And every time I put on a sports coat, I feel like I'm ready to go to my bar mitzvah, but this doesn't fit for me, but I can sort of manage it, but I don't feel comfortable with it. So I'm thrilled to be here and talk with you and learn a little together. And as Richard knows, I tend to be highly opinionated and a little sparky about subject matters. So that's what I do.
Question and topic and theme I'd like to raise right now is, there's a lot of buzz since Mark kind of shifted gears and changed his company name to Meta. Apple's recent announcement we'll talk about. I think there's two areas to look at. When you look at Metaverse, you've got to look at it from an enterprise perspective and all of the traditional enterprise opportunities around supply chain, factory floors, training and development, and what have you. And then there's the gaming and luxury retail. And at the end of the day, these are opportunities for either training, in my humble opinion, or great opportunities as a powerful digital marketing channel to engage and convert and retain an audience, clients, and what have you. So let's start with the title Metaverse. So Neil Stephenson coined this thing in a book back in the 90s called Snow Crash. How many folks actually read Snow Crash here? Awesome. Krista works closely with Neil, I know. And so this term is getting some connotation, unfortunately, because of the association with many things. So where are we with the term? I've heard immersive internet. I'm starting to wane from using metaverse. I'm using immersive internet, spatial computing, and other, I think, more relevant terms, quite frankly. So where are we now with the terminology? My first part. And then secondly, how are companies looking at it more from a use case perspective within various sectors? So we'll work round robin.
Okay, well, for me, I like still using the word metaverse. I felt that it was kind of hijacked. And I think that there was a lot of a hype cycle, especially with media and in misinformation. The way that I look at the metaverse is that eventually we're going to have very highly powerful wearables. The AR glasses will become smaller, more fashionable, and it will be ubiquitous, and eventually replace our digital, our smartphones. And so I think that the ubiquitous presence of a digital layer of immersive experiences that are nearly indistinguishable from reality, and hyper real, really beautiful experiences, which is what I want to see, is what I see as the metaverse. Then, of course, powered with AI, so that you see what you want to see when you want to see it. And then you also have all these other services and so much knowledge and educational and health and wellness capabilities in that digital layer of experiences through the wearables. I think that in the future, we have to consider that the metaverse is not only just a place where you buy and sell land and all of these things. It's human interaction with the world. It's an interface, an XR, and it's going to change the way we interact. It's going to change our world.
When people say, is the metaverse dead? I don't think the metaverse is dead. The hype around the metaverse is what's dead, and I'm glad it got killed because it was just way too much. I mean, I personally benefited from it, I have to be honest. But I do think it created a lot of confusion. Everywhere I went, I was like, can you define the metaverse? And I'm like, I'm not interested in defining it. I want to build it. If you want a great definition, look at Matthew Ball's, definition. That's the one everyone uses. For me, it was a bit of a relief, if I'm going to be 100% honest, to hear Apple, you and I have talked about this, to hear Apple use the word spatial computing, because it's a term that I'm very comfortable with, having worked at Magic Leap, where Neil Stephenson was our chief futurist. I think all of us here have worked with Neil on some capacity. But hearing that term, because I was like, okay, great, we can get back into talking about technology and not so much this concept. I still use the term metaverse. Right, I still think it's an interesting term. To me, it's the successor state to today's mobile internet. It is, it is enabled by many different technologies, so it's not one single company, and it's not VR, it's not Ready Player One, that's not the only technology, right? I do think that I am seeing people moving away from the term or trying to find different terms. I'm really interested in kind of digging down on spatial computing now that it's back in the it wasn't out of the vocabulary, but I think Apple made it very relevant. That being said, metaverse and spatial computing are not the same thing. I think we can, debate or talk about that. I'm actually kind of happy that that hype is over. It was a little bit too much confusion, like you mentioned, too much. The word just became a polluted word, right? There's too much opinions, pollution, and everything. And then you also had, for example, I think a lot of confusion as to, some folks I think in the crypto space kind of said, we're running with this word. People in gaming were running with the word.
Good.
So I think from my broad perspective, so coming from a place where we have a very positive, comfortable working relationship with what I refer to as the artist formerly known as Facebook, and we enjoy that relationship. Glad you get a little chuckle out of that, because I like that. I actually learned it from a student at UCLA. So with all that being said, I think an interesting perspective that I was reflecting on is, imagine if you saw a press release today from Google, that Google said, we're changing our name to Internet, because almost everybody on the planet, by order of magnitude, accesses the internet via Google. We're the most popular portal for the internet, so therefore we're just going to change our name to Internet. That's kind of what Meta did when they sort of absconded the term and sort of moved into this idea of, well, there's all this stuff happening, we feel like we're playing a role in it, so we're just going to take over that nomenclature. And a lot of people and a lot of companies of various sizes, startups and groups, kind of working to affect this change of where the internet will be going, we're like, well, that's not really great. We don't like that you sort of absconded that name and that terminology. So we all kind of as a global group push back on it. I would not be surprised, like I said, I often say very controversial things in public. I would not be surprised if that artist formerly known as Facebook did a pivot at some point and sort of were very honest with the fact that they were like, you know what? This was actually probably not the best idea. We think we should rejigger our nomenclature to reflect more the different things that we're doing and the power that we bring to people and so on and so on. I would not be surprised if that doesn't happen over the next.
The next name change might be something like quantum, perhaps. Who knows? But
No, please don't.
I think on the vernacular and nomenclature of what this thing is, it's important that most folks living in these spaces, 3.2 billion gamers, folks that have been in Roblox and Minecraft, many folks, certain demographics, don't call it metaverse. They're just doing their thing, they're socializing, they're buying digital goods, they're just in it. So I think terminology is less important. I mean, some of us go back to the internet in the early 90s. What was the internet back in 92, 93? No one really knew. Companies were blocking access to it. And they developed new organizations called the Interactive Group, because IT didn't know what to do with it. Marketing had no idea what to do with it. So they created these new groups, and things evolved. We're kind of in the same space, I think, right now with these things. We've got disparate, disconnected environments, if you will, we need interoperability, we need standards, and it'll come eventually. So with that, I think the most recent buzz around this topic is definitely our friends at Apple and the Vision Pro announcement. For those of you who are not aware of this, it's been a long time in the making, and it is very disruptive. It's not just another VR headset by any means whatsoever. Some of us have been privy to this stuff long before the announcement, so we can talk about it now. We couldn't before we were prepping for the panel, but I'd like to go around and just have maybe everyone opine on what does this Apple product and announcement. They also made an acquisition of Mira, I think, which is also equally important. So what does all that mean to this future of our immersive internet and spatial computing future?
It means it's signaling the real beginning point of ubiquitous computing. It really is an announcement to the world that no, the metaverse is not dead. No, spatial computing is the future. That the wearables, that the technology will accelerate, and that things are moving ahead from here and will only get better and better. And so it's a signal to the world, yes, be ready, because there is a major shift happening.
Yeah, it was I think for a lot of us in the industry, we've been waiting for this for years, right? A lot of us bet our careers on this. To me, I think it's really important because one of the things that I saw missing was people were so focused on the hardware, and I understand why they were. It is truly amazing hardware. But they were like, oh, this is a VR AR headset or something. Like, this is a spatial computer. This is a supercomputer that you put on your face that sees what you see, that learns from everything that you're doing. That's a monumental shift. It's combining both the convergence of compute power and communication into one single device. That's massive. Also, I think the lack of understanding that even though they did not use the term AI, like Google did in their presentation many, many times in one of their presentations at Google I/O, Apple didn't have to do that because this was as much an investment in VR AR hardware and the future of AR glasses as it is an investment in AI, because this is the interface, how we're going to engage with AI. XR is the interface for AI. We're going to eventually move away from texts and prompts, because that's what we're doing right now with generative AI, but eventually it's going to be more conversational, it's going to be more spatial context, right? So this is, to me, a monumental shift in how we compute and the devices we use. I'm truly excited to see where this is going. And Mira, I've known that team. You probably have known Ben and the team there for a long time. Amazing group of folks. I think what that signals, that acquisition, is that longer term vision that Apple has. And Gen 2, Gen 3, you're going to see more of a mass market product.
What Apple tends to do is the art of innovation via refinement. That's what Apple likes to do. That's their comfortable spot. So they'll look at a category and they'll look at the hardware that's developing and the use cases that are developing, and so think about like everybody else in the business as pulling like the rocks out of the water and just putting them on someone's face or someone's body and saying, there you go. And what Apple will do is take those same rocks and put them in the polishing machine for years and years and years and years with lots of resources, enormous resources and enormous talent to reach a level of refinement and comfort, psychological sort of human comfort with the computing sort of concept. And then when they feel like they're ready, they will bring it out to the world. And that's a good perspective.
And like you said, Ted, you always say this, and I always remember this, Apple always plays the long game. Yes. This is a long-term play. Don't think that this is a one-off, this is a long-term play. It's just getting started.
There are some remarkable things about how they have advanced the idea of computing outside of a screen that lives like this or in your hands. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that's going to be very powerful. And a lot of agent of change happening right now.
Right, I think the other misnomer for the metaverse anyway is that it's only in virtual environments when it's a combination of physical space as well as digital space, accessible from various products, not just VR goggles, if you will. So great feedback on the Apple announcement. I think it's very relative to where this is all going to go. Let's talk about the convergence I mentioned earlier. There's a confluence here. Metaverse by itself is a virtual space. You've got Web3 and blockchain. Some folks associate Web3 with pictures of apes selling for millions of dollars. The technology behind Web3 is blockchain. One of the founders of blockchain is here in the room right now, Scott somewhere. He'll be speaking later about this technology. So we've got to separate Web3 from the hype of the last 2 years, which I lived and started in the art world, but you've got to bring it up to the enterprise and bring it up to consumers and retail and marketing opportunities and what have you, and then Gen AI or AI in general. And these three things are very powerful when combined to create experiences and influence decisions. There's also, as Krista's going to talk about later and demonstrate all the good stuff that comes out of this in mental health and wellness that I don't think there's enough dialogue, quite frankly, about. What is this convergence of these three things? What happens when you mix these technologies together? What comes out of that from a job to be done and outcome perspective?
So I made some observations from being at the TED Talk a few months ago. I spoke on Web3 with Yatsu and Ken Aoki, who's a really sort of well-known developer in Ethereum. And predominantly the discussions were about AI. They were the most popular talks, and most of the talks were very fear-based. You know, the risks of AI, AI insurgencies, AI warfare, deep fakes. You know, it's all of these potential insurgencies of our identities, our data, and our IP by AI. So as I was thinking there, I thought, my goodness, everyone is so incredibly talented, really at the leading edge, but truly siloed in their specific specialties, AI, blockchain, and metaverse, if you will. And I thought, no, really the intersection is the future. Because if you look at how the world is going to adopt blockchain, I actually feel that blockchain, and a huge impetus to adopt blockchain, is through the protection of our data, protection of our identity. The cryptography will protect us and provide us with security and a method to verify and authenticate what is real versus what is fake. And as an artist, and anyone who's creating IP or in the world, period, we can actually have our identity attached to the blockchain through our biometrics. There is technology, even Sam Altman is creating a WorldCoin project. He's creating the solution to the problem of OpenAI, which is to create a retinal scanning technology and to basically encapsulate that ID into the blockchain so that you have a permanent and immutable identifier, right? And there's also another company called Tenbeo in Belgium that I'm collaborating with, and they take your heartbeat, because our heartbeat is a unique algorithm. And with that, we can use it as a wallet to unlock our car, to unlock our home, to unlock our assets, and to also sign off on our IP. So in the future, what we see, we will always feel is fake. We're always going to think that something is fake before it is verified in the blockchain, either as a Krista Kim artwork or even as your voice. If I'm speaking on the phone or even doing an interview, it has to be verified that I was the one who was on the screen and not my deepfake, right? So the convergence, especially because when you think about metaverse, the metaverse and the wearables is how we are going to witness and experience all of this data, all of these experiences that we're going to produce with AI. And AI, more than ever, is actually being integrated into the production of whatever we create, the digital experiences that we are producing. It's really accelerating the process of production, making it faster, making it more efficient. I mean, all of these things are coming together.
Yeah, and to that point, Krista, I think it's important, and you were one of the first people that I heard talk about the importance of Web3, right? Because Web3 is moving from, the Bored Ape craziness NFTs. And all those NFTs to more of like being able to say, okay, Web3 infrastructure, blockchain can potentially create that watermark that is cryptographically signed that allows you to know something is human-made, right? Or something is fake. So I think that there's going to be a lot of things there when it comes to our digital identity, to provenance. I do a lot of work. We have a lot of clients in the luxury space. That's obviously something they're very interested in. but thinking about how to use these underlying technologies, right, to verify that something truly is what it is. You mentioned voice cloning, which has advanced leaps and bounds. It's actually kind of scary. I will say two things about that just briefly, because I do feel very strongly about that as a mom. One thing we've started to implement in my family, and this is not to be doom and gloom, but I think it's important, is we actually created a family safe word. So if I ever get my parents live in Latin America, so that's part of the reason. But if I ever were to get a call that someone has been, kidnapped or abducted, and they use their voice clone to say that they're there, I can always ask for the family safe word, which is a word that's not on the internet, that we have created, and that's kind of the word that I know. I'm actually speaking to my dad, or I'm actually speaking to my child. Right, so
I just implemented that this past weekend, so thank you for that.
The family safe word. It's crazy that we have to do that, but I think that you're going to start to see a lot more of that provenance, that those blockchain-enabled watermarks that allow us to know something is real or if it is AI generated. We'll see a lot more of that. I personally, in my personal fashion projects, for example, I'm creating jewelry that has an NFC chip that is actually a physical NFT. So this jewelry, actually, you scan it and then you mint it on the blockchain. So the physical and virtual assets are linked forever. They're forever on chain, creating that provenance, that legacy opportunity. And I do think that, at least the work that we're doing at Journey is trying to figure out how to actually merge our physical touch points with the virtual touch points, because right now everything's done in silos. And that's a big opportunity that we see coming in the future.
So I'll take this as a slightly different direction as you're talking about the utility of what we now call Web3, which I think is a pretty healthy, good catch-all term. It's non-volatile for the most part. Is that there are definitely a lot of layers to something as broad as where do we evolve the internet, right? And there is somewhat a belief structure, which I think is largely a falsehood, especially at a conference like this where you're largely talking about the dollars and cents that go into innovation and investment dynamics and how people make a profit, make money, take their risks, all those things. I think there's interesting things to talk about through this lens. When you're looking at how broad and massively powerful the use cases are for something that we already use constantly all day, every day, and how it evolves, there are layers of kind of this underlying fabric of this connective tissue that will evolve from what we did today with largely things like HTML, where we said HTML5, HTML6, that everybody sort of uses in the public square, in the public forum, and nobody actually profits from. They profit from things on top of that. What we're seeing with the next part of the internet are new use cases and new ways that we design spatial sort of building blocks to allow people to build things and use things and then profit on top of them. So in my world, because I work in the entertainment business, I give the example a lot of what Pixar did with a file format called USD, the Universal Scene Descriptor. So they could have chosen to keep that for themselves, but they saw that there was a much bigger benefit to build something that they put a lot of money into and release it out to the world with no licensing agent, no fees charged. Anybody can use it to interchange files across multiple graphics formats so that lots of people could work on things together. It was beneficial to Pixar to do that and beneficial to the planet of creatives to do that. Richard, you may want to go into AI a little bit in the time we have left, but AI will play a very large role in this evolution of the creative process and what we do with it, which is a very controversial topic right now. But there's a lot to it through the lens of these sort of universal benefits that computing of all forms bring us. And this is just another one in that.
Yeah, I think tomorrow we're going to be joined by one of the founders of one of the large AI companies, Stability, Emad Mustaq. And we've spoken to entertainment companies, KPMG, we've spoken to gaming companies, and the opportunity to create content on the fly, real time, while you're in digital environments. The ramifications of that as it relates to engagement and opportunity to on the digital ad sales front, obviously, it's an obvious one. But on all the health and wellness opportunities, which we'll, again, we chatting about earlier, I think this is coming and there's a confluence happening. But AI specifically, like as Cathy mentioned, it's not obvious in the Vision Pro product, but it's definitely embedded there and definitely at the forefront of that. The other association of Web3 I failed to mention is that the whole cryptocurrency association, which is still there. I think post-FTX, it's getting there. I think Trevor mentioned, this is the opportunity to build in these downturns, utilities and build environments, not going anywhere. Blockchain, as Krista mentioned, is only getting started. It is the best way to create provenance, authenticity. It's an immutable recording of a transaction. It's a smart contract. The state of California has embraced this technology for something as boring as their DMV records. Not a sexy use case, but a real one. They're using Tezos, and it's coming. The government's acknowledging this, so more on that. So I guess I'd like to shift. We've got some good time here left. Let's talk a little bit about, again, there's the consumer opportunities of Metaverse as it relates to gaming. All of our luxury retail friends are all over this. I came from Christie's. They're now, I guess Gucci's all about it. Certain brands have really embraced it. It is the ultimate digital marketing channel to engage and convert and make people buy stuff, let's face it. But there's also the Web3 component of owning a Hermes bag that also is tied to the blockchain because the counterfeiting in that space is significant. So these are all great use cases. So on the enterprise side, which a lot of our audience here is equally interested in, what are some of the use cases for this technology for the enterprise? Supply chain management, factory floors, learning and development. I mean, it's endless. Healthcare has a slew of opportunity. What are some of the things you're seeing on the enterprise side, non-retail, that are happening with this technology that we should know about?
Do you want to start?
We'll go
That is
round
not
robin.
my expertise.
Okay. I will share data, and we know Shelley Peterson, who was at Lockheed now, I think she's at Microsoft, but they used spatial computing via the HoloLens to create the Orion capsule, I believe that's the name. The data that they had was amazing. A 93% reduction in cost for that capsule. Like 93% reduction in cost. Like that is an enterprise case study that I think everybody should be talking about, but not everyone's talking about that. But things like there's so much happening in that space when it comes to reduction of cost, when speeding up training of labor, all these sorts of things that are happening in that space that have proven numbers and proven data that I don't think enough people are talking about, which is, I think, massive, but 93% reduction in cost of production costs. So
yeah, I mean, something that floats between enterprise and consumer and tends to start with enterprise and then move into consumer, although in this case it's sort of the opposite, is largely what we refer to as the digital twinning of the universe. So the idea of taking a use case like you with a space capsule and factory floors and giant projects that need to be designed and envisioned, and how do we use both immersive technologies and just the graphics power to drive these things so you can see it, feel it. Essentially, we're in the age where we're starting to build and understand how to build very effective simulations of almost anything that lives in an enterprise productivity and profit environment. So you're de-risking and you're learning how to be more creative and more malleable. And you can test how does an audience or a user group or an employee group move through these things. Walmart did this. They bought hundreds of thousands of headsets to work within their factories, their warehouses, to simulate how it is to move these giant boxes off these giant pallets with these big forklifts, and was very successful in training with a simulation. And we see it across almost every industry. Automotive industry is using digital twins and simulations constantly to design cars and build new things faster and cheaper and better. In our business in the entertainment world, and this is across the board, not just our company, but many companies, we're using it to design theme parks of the future. So we can design it all electronically and even feel what it feels like to go through these rides, to get snacks, to move from place to place inside a theme park using a technological layer as opposed to a physical layer. And then the physical build comes once everybody goes, yeah, let's go build it now.
And to that point, I do want to add something, because I feel like virtual twins, with the compute power, the technology we have, are truly becoming new management information systems. That before it used to be just a virtual twin that you didn't do much with. But right now, like a lot of the work that we're doing with virtual twins, is these are new management information systems updated in real time, right, that allow you to make these decisions. And to that point where you just mentioned about designing these spaces, when I was at Magic Leap, we used to say, if you have to design something for the real world, the physical world, why not design it in the physical world through spatial computing, wearing the device, right, with 3D assets, but looking at it in your reality. So yeah, definitely, from an enterprise.
Stakes are lower when you're not moving concrete and girders and rebar around. You can do that all digitally, and you feel it.
Yeah.
Like I've been involved in humongous projects where the only way to show people, you would think these people are kind of the vision of, like, this isn't going to work. Why is it not going to work? And you can put them on as many computer screens as you want. They don't get why it's not going to work. But you build a simulation and you put them in a headset and you have them move from place to place inside a big audience auditorium or a road project or a themed entertainment project. And you can immediately see, you're like, oh, well, clearly that's not going to work. Right, exactly. Let's go fix that because it's truly a simulation.
Right. So product development has huge opportunities. The automotive industry, by the way, is also tremendously looking at this technology because cars are going to have more and more screens. More and more screens mean more eyeballs mean more engagement for advertising and what have you, and engagement, not just the environment. So that's coming. So I guess the last point we should touch on, I think, is we talked about the opportunities for interoperability, which definitely needs to be there. There are ethical considerations. There are environmental impact issues. There's regulation, governance matters. It's still a wild west from an IP perspective on the metaverse, the Decentraland, Sandbox, and others, Roblox. Brands feel somewhat that they can be infringed upon very easily without ramification. A lot of my artist friends speak about that same topic specifically. So I guess the last round here, what are some of the issues around this and what's happening in that space from a regulatory perspective and also on the ethical consideration front to ensure diversity and inclusion? I know there's organizations, Krista, you're involved with there. So what's happening in that space?
We're still so early that I think that we actually have to educate government to create regulations and guardrails to protect the public. And I think especially since we're going into wellness and creating wellness experiences, I believe that there should be regulations involved out there as well, that there should be more research and education, really, in the space. Because if you're actually creating safe spaces for group therapy sessions that are guided by AI, we can train the AI model to be very, very specific in what they speak about and the limitations. And also if there's any sort of wrongdoing in the space, then there can be immediate action taken through the AI monitoring of these spaces as well. So I just feel like we're just so early right now that we're really the ones writing the rules and really experimenting at this time.
Yeah, I mean, from a regulation standpoint, obviously the EU is taking a step forward with crypto and AI and trying to regulate that space, whereas the US were lagging behind. Definitely. I live in the DC area, so I've had the chance many a time to go down to Capitol Hill and try to educate lawmakers on some of these emerging technologies and what they are. So I think a lot of it is them understanding what do these technologies mean, what do they, what are the implications for society. I'm personally, because I come from that XR spatial computing background, things like virtual air rights keep me up at night. Like who owns the air around me if everything eventually becomes real estate? That is really, that's more of a frontier thing, but it keeps me up at night. And I think that, we need to educate lawmakers on the possibility that that's going to be an issue in the future. So,
I think maybe an interesting perspective on this, Richard, is I guess the best way to describe it is the ease of access to these tools. So I think we would all largely agree that democratization of tools and tool sets and value points is a good thing. But what we see within the realms of something new, like Web3, Metaverse, blockchain, all these things, is the barriers to entry because of what we can do with software and silicon these days are so low that you get a massive amount of companies and people attempting to do things. And it's hard to sort of navigate how real they are, how false they are, because they all have sort of the same tool sets, right? In generations past, barriers to entry helped us. Like we could study things through a lens of, it was really hard to do this, so if you managed to get through the woods and get to the other side, you probably were legit. These days, it's hard to gauge what's legit and what's just nonsense. And so in the world of, like you mentioned, Decentraland and some of these other things, we largely see that all these different companies propped up these things and they're ghost towns. They don't attract anybody, right? They attract some early investment dollars and then that falls off. So that's a cultural challenge that I think like a company like KPMG has to be dealing with that all the time, is how do you bring something forth that when everybody can kind of do it almost instantaneously, Now, the world of UGC is very powerful, and we see lots of benefits from it. So it's a bit of an Occam's razor problem, right? You're kind of like, there's a lot of good, but there's also a lot of challenges that companies have to deal with when the tools, and now with the advent of what's coming, as you guys have been talking about, Gen AI, the ability to code things without actually hiring coders, the ability to build things without actually hiring creatives. There's a whole new wave of this fakery coming that's going to be really interesting to analyze and study.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, content creation, we all hear about the images being created. ChatGPT creates proposals and books and scripts. There's text to video coming. And the text that I've seen that the world hasn't is going to be undistinguishable video, not just pictures. So what does that do to the whole deep fake scenario? So